What's going on, Hokie Nation? Happy Monday morning. Well, Hokie weekend down in Charlotte didn't necessarily live up to all the hype, but it certainly was salvaged by a football win on Saturday, a thrashing over Boston College up in Chestnut Hill. We're talking basketball. We're talking football. It's episode 329 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Monday, November 13th, 2023 from the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. We got the entire football crew on set. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And hey, refer the show to a friend as well, why don't you? Well, on set, we got to my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, our senior staff writer, Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, managing editor David Cunningham. The Mustache Man, Nick Brown, producing as always behind the scenes on your Monday, and I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Fellas, Tech Sideline presented by First Bank and Trust Company. The TSL podcast, though, is also brought to you by Alumni Hall. It's the place to gear up for Hokies games. Located in the First and Main Shopping Center in Blacksburg, they've been serving Hokie fans for 15 years. Order your Hokies gear online at alumnihall.com. Well, basketball we'll get to later on in the show. Some fun showings, but disappointing losses by both the men's and women's team, nevertheless, down in the Queen City. But it was all salvaged by a big football win. Went on the road, took care of business against Boston College up in Chestnut Hill. 48-22 was the final score. Chris, we'll start with you. Immediate thoughts. Then, Andy, we want to hear about the trip as well.
I was very confident all week that Virginia Tech was going to beat Boston College because I thought the Hokies' strengths aligned well with BC's weaknesses. Until about midnight Friday night, and I'm sitting there thinking, Virginia Tech has lost every big sporting event so far this weekend. Women's basketball, wrestling, so a couple of top 10 matchups in there, and then the men's basketball game too. So I'm like, now they're just going to go ahead and complete the circle. Not because they're like worse than BC, but just because, right? So that's the only time I wavered was after the men's game on Friday night. But I thought Tech had some advantages in that, but there were also some things in the game that just kind of snowballed in Tech's direction. And to their credit, they forced some of it with the interceptions and the onside kick and things like that. But Boston College is a team, they've been kind of teetering on the brink. I mean, you hold the ball for over 40 minutes in each of their last two games, but can't score more than like 17 points or 21 points. I mean, they've been beating bad teams barely by controlling the clock. There's a certain set of conditions that have to exist for BC to win. And I think you could say the same for Virginia Tech to a certain extent with regards to Tech's offense. But obviously those conditions were met on Saturday for Tech, and they were not for Boston College.
Yeah, it was, they proved they could do a couple things. They can win on the road. They can start fast. They can continue to, put their foot on the neck of an opponent and just put them away for the game. I mean, it was a dominant performance, start to finish. I mean, it starts with that interception, Dorian Strong on the first play that really set the tone. I know they only get a field goal out of that, but I think they scored 6 touchdowns on 6 of 7 drives at one point. They were just efficient. They kept moving the ball down the field. They kept scoring. They kept punching into the end zone, even when they got into the red zone, something they've had troubles with. Ran the ball, ran it well, threw the ball effectively. I mean, it stopped the run. That was another thing. I mean, Castellanos had his second fewest rushing yards this season. That was a big concern, especially when you saw him early, kind of got out of the pocket, scrambled for a couple first downs. You go, okay, here you go. Here we go. This is how it happens. And they completely shut it down the rest of the game. It was a really impressive job, start to finish. And, I credit the coaching staff too. They got them up early. They roused them early in the morning. That was after the game. Prize that we did some things different in the pregame that, we'll probably keep that internal. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get this out of the players. I'm going to find out what they did differently. And sure enough, the players are like, they had a 7:30 wake-up call normally. 7:13, they get a phone call waking them up. And they're like, oh, that must have been a mistake. Then 7:15, every GA and analyst and staffer in the program is going up and down the hallway, just like banging on doors and rousing guys out of bed. So it was just sort of a shock to the system. They had high energy, early morning meetings. They were clearly trying to do something different ahead of this road game. And, it worked, whatever it was. I don't know if they can expect an early wake-up call the next time they have a game. Maybe they'll see that coming. But, they came out energized. They kept it through the entire game, and it was a winning formula.
Andy, to piggyback off your point, I think most impressive was the fact that in 5 red zone trips, Virginia Tech put up 4 touchdowns. And I remember sitting there thinking early in that ball game, you go down, you kick that field goal, and I'm watching the very beginning of the game while I'm at the gym, and I'm just, here we go. Like, man, you needed a touchdown there, and then that wasn't the case the rest of the game. They nailed it.
Yeah, they got the field goal. Then BC drives down the field and scores, and I'm sitting there like, okay, they just ran it down Tech's throat. Tech had to settle for a field goal in the red zone.
After it jumped off snap infraction on 4th and 1, they're going to go for it
exactly.
Inside the 5.
So you're kind of like, well, got the pick on the first play, but other than that, it's not going well. But then it really started going well after that.
Started going, and then it was game over.
Game over.
I would say.
Did you turn and say it to anybody?
I did not say it to anybody. I don't think anybody would have gotten that reference.
When it was
but
24-7, that's when it
I
was
got a
game
lot
over.
of tweets and different messages from people. It's like, when is it going to be game over in this one? I'm like, I don't trust the defense quite yet, but at a certain point, it's like, yep, this one's over.
How was the trip all in all? A fun trip up to Chestnut Hill for you?
Great trip. I bought tickets to the Celtics game on Friday night. I said, I asked for the Tech Sideline seats, and this is where they put me. And some people came and was like, is that really where Tech Sideline seats? I'm like, no, I bought those seats. Those aren't actual Tech Sideline seats. So no, that was a good time. I hadn't been down there. They've really built up that whole area. I got like the full Boston experience.
Yeah.
Just like the saltiness of some of the people. I was in a bar beforehand, and I'll edit the language for the podcast here. Sullivan's Tap across the street. And I'm having a couple beers before the game, and one of the bartender goes to another one. It's like, somebody just came up to me. They asked for a water because they're trying to be responsible. I'm like, it's 6:22. I mean, there's responsible, but come on. It's like, this is my kind of town. These people are heavy drinkers up there. So it was a good time Friday night. The game was enjoyable. Met up with Nate Crossman, former Virginia Tech beat writer, Lynchburg News and Advance, when I was there after the game. So full Boston experience. I got it.
Awesome. How many bowls of that New England clam chowder did you
I
hammer?
hit 3.
Okay.
And if I would have pushed it to 4, it would have been uncomfortable.
Okay.
I might have been in a coma for the entire game. So it was 3 pregame. I crushed it. Felt good about it. And then it's like, all right, maybe 3 was too many. I think 3 is the limit. I don't know if I could do 4.
Did they keep it out throughout? You know how the media meal usually goes away. Was there any halftime snack?
They had like cookies and stuff at halftime. Okay. I can't remember if the chowder was still out there at that point, but you got to hit it early.
Yeah, because I was wondering if this is something you do like 2, come back for a halftime bowl, but no,
I went 3 pregame. I just plowed through it in the pregame. I'm like, I'm hitting this number.
There we go.
Hitting this number.
How about Kyron drones? I mean, just unbelievable. Really engineered the offense, arguably to perfection, you could say. 219 yards through the air. Came out to begin the 4th quarter. Always good if your quarterback just literally doesn't have to play 15 minutes of football, right? Also 135 rushing yards. I mean, a dominant performance out of KD1.
Tech came out their first 2 drives and threw the ball 40% of the time, which, 60-40 run pass split obviously still favors the run, but they only came away with 3 points on those drives. And their next, 3 drives, they scored touchdowns. And there was 1 point in those 3 drives where they ran the ball on 16 consecutive plays. And out of 19 total plays on those drives, they ran it, 22 total plays on those drives, they ran it 19 times. As soon as they got the run established, after the 16 straight runs was the touchdown pass to Glesner. So it's like they established the run and then they threw off the run. And the Virginia Tech offense is just a much more efficient offense throwing the football if they've established the run in advance. And it's interesting. I was running some Kyron Drones numbers this past weekend. His 3 best games passing the ball as a Virginia Tech starter, he's averaged I think it's 21.6 pass attempts per game. I've compared him to Hendon Hooker as a redshirt sophomore. So I went back and looked at Hendon Hooker's numbers from 2019. In games that Hooker started and finished that year, he averaged 21.4 pass attempts per game. So Tech is throwing the ball. The ideal offensive situation for Tech is throwing the ball just over 20 times per game. Actually, Drones' 2 most efficient games, he's thrown it 17 times and 19 times. And it's not that, he can't throw or pass or anything like that. It's just it makes him and the offense so much more effective if there's a running game that's established. So I think, enough evidence is built up now with this Virginia Tech offense that you can look at the box score and see the number of passes that Virginia Tech is throwing. If it's a certain number, that means the running game is going well. That means they are not behind the chains. That means they are not playing at a deficit on the scoreboard, and they're able to really rely on that running game. And I think that's where the offense needs to live. And if the offense can live there, Kyron Drones is an extremely effective quarterback. I mean, look at these numbers. 12 of 17 for 219 yards. That's an incredible yards per attempt number. Yeah. And then obviously against Boston College, 135 rushing yards. We talked about that before the game. We thought Virginia Tech was going to lean heavy on the run, especially the quarterback run, because that's BC's strength. BC came in outside the top 100 in rush defense, but they came in top 20 in pass defense. Virginia Tech's kind of the opposite on offense, where they can really run it, but you don't want to put them in obvious passing situations. So they came out and established the run. Because they established the run, they were able to be highly efficient throwing the football. So yeah, I thought Drones played a great game. I thought the coaching staff put him in the right position to play a great game. And it was just, you could see, it became obvious in that point that Virginia Tech was in control. You could see the body language of the Boston College players at some point say, we're done. Like, there's just no way we're going to win this game. It was evident watching the game on television.
I think early on you could see they really put trust in Drones in the running game. I mean, how many quarterback draws? Just not even read plays, just straight quarterback draws where he'd hesitate for a second and then run it straight ahead. And, they played ahead of the sticks because of that. It was 3rd and 4, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. I mean, last week we were talking about 32, 27, 17. I mean, they put themselves in manageable situations. They were able to extend drives, keep Boston College off the field like that. And I think Drones was a tough runner in that game. He moved the sticks. He was falling forward. He was a real load. You get in 4th and short, and all of a sudden the whole playbook's open. And all of a sudden you put the ball in Drones' hands, and he can make something happen. And then you get some big plays after that. He had the 59-yard run where I think they faked a pitch to the left, and then he ran back to the right, and there was just nobody there. A big run that direction. He had the wherewithal that BC jumped off sides. He throws a deep ball to Daquan Felton, who made a great catch, and then even better run after the catch where he's kind of spinning around and dragged the guy with him for a little bit. So just a great start to finish offensive game for the Hokies here.
Tech averaged 8 yards per play on first down. Those, so they're in a lot.
2.3 last week.
Exactly. And I think it was like 8 yards per play the week before against Syracuse, wasn't it? It was something like that.
Yeah, their average third down this week that needed to go was 6.1 yards. Right. Last week it was 13.3.
Right.
So it tells you how bad they were on first and second down, but they hit 13.3 yards every third down.
Exactly. So on 3rd and 3 or shorter, Tech was 5 of 6 on third down conversions. 3rd and 4 through 7, they were 2 of 4. 3rd and 8 or longer, they were 1 of 5. Which makes sense. The closer you are to the first down marker on third down, the more likely you are to pick it up.
It's really simple when you think about it sometimes, right?
It really is. So yeah, I thought, obviously, Tech, when you put up 600 yards of offense, you're pretty much effective on every down. But I think first down, Tech averaged 8 yards per play. Second down, they averaged 6.1 yards per play. The funny thing is, on third down, they actually did average 11.9 yards per play on third down.
That's impressive because third down was kind of an issue coming in.
Was that Grant Wells run on third down?
Might have been.
That boost the total there?
It probably did, yeah.
I think the Felton play was on third down, too.
It might have been.
I believe you're correct, yeah.
So that would have been, so the Felton play, I don't remember the down and distance.
I think it was like 3rd and 8 or something. They jumped
then
off
that would have been their one play.
I think it was.
And it was a 70-yarder?
70.
Yes.
70 on the dot. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, they had 600 yards of offense, and the last time they had 600 yards of offense was that ODU game in 2018. Like, the weirdest statistical anomaly is, like, you had 600 yards of offense and lost a game. It's like, yes, that's how bad that game was.
It's the Felton play. All right, shades of, I don't know how many people watching this podcast remember this, but the 1999 Virginia Tech UVA game, Michael Vick on the opening drive hits Andre Davis for a touchdown. And it's one of those deep balls that is really far over Davis's head, and he had to reach out and literally catch the ball with his fingertips. It's a play that stands out from 1999, where a whole lot of plays stood out, and that's what that play reminded me of. It had Victor Davis vibes.
Wow.
From just how the ball was caught. Like, he caught it on his fingertips way out in front of him. And the other thing I'll say about that play is, going into this game, Drones was 4 of 27 passing on plays where the ball had to travel 20 yards downfield this year. So it's not a high completion number. Now, he had 3 touchdowns on those 4 completions, right? But it had not been a high percentage play for Virginia Tech this year. So every time you see him wind up for a deep ball, you're like, here's a low percentage play. But like, when it works, it's generally to Felton. And it's a huge play every time he does it.
That Felton play was 3rd and 6.
3rd and 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
I found the play calling to really be exceptional. Now, with that being said, you're playing a very porous defense. I understand that, and sometimes they do make things easy. But just every time you're hammering it with the run, right? And so many nice misdirection things like that fake pitch, and then Kyron goes for the long one. That's a really nice play, and that's more to Kyron because he had options on that play, and he chose to tuck it and run. But the one that really stood out to me was the touchdown to Jalen Lane, where, I mean, just perfect timing. You're hammering it down their throat. They're going to stuff the run, and I mean, Jalen Lane is wide open to walk into the end zone. That's mixing it up to perfection right there.
I thought so. I think it was 16 straight running plays at that point. And then I think Jalen Lane, he could teach a clinic on pick plays, right? Unlike
The
last week.
Gosnell one, yeah, he
That was
ran
beautiful, too.
the flag route there and just ran through his guy and kept running the route, didn't stop, didn't turn around and kind of look to see if, like, did I get the flag on that? It's like, no, it's perfect.
Nope,
and
it was
Gosnell
perfect.
was wide. It's like, how did he get that open? It's like, oh, they ran an effective pick play on this.
Yep.
Gosnell's first tutty, right?
Yeah, they was.
First
and
career
well
touchdown,
earned.
yeah.
But like, regarding the play call and your overall point, I agree. But I also think when you've got the right scheme and you've got the right game planning throughout the week and you go into it with the right strategy, I mean, I'm not saying there aren't better play callers than others, but I think the main thing, I think running the right scheme makes your play calling a lot easier. And I've not had an issue with Virginia Tech's play calling at all ever since they changed the scheme. My only gripe would be probably against Louisville. They could have got Drones outside the pocket more. But that game fell off from the very beginning. That you're kind of grasping at straws at some point. But on the whole, it's like I said, it's amazing how much better your play calling is when you run the right scheme.
And another, there's some tough running in that game too. You look at Bashaw Tootin, a couple of the touchdowns that he had where he just kind of kept churning the legs and getting in. It felt like BC was a broken team by the end. That Malachi Thomas touchdown run, which I think David hit the buy sell on that one.
No, we didn't. This is the first week we took it out because it hadn't hit, and I just figured I'm just tallying losses for you guys. I'm not going to put it in.
Well, that was about the easiest. Like, he got by, and like, I think some of the blockers got out there like, there's nothing for me to do here. That I could just, you're like a wingman just running along the side of this jet going to the end zone. I mean, I feel like BC was just demoralized by the end of that game by the way the Tech was playing offense against us, which hasn't happened a whole lot for Virginia Tech lately. It was probably a pretty good feeling.
Can't hammer home enough how great of a find Bashal Tootin was out of the transfer portal. I mean,
he was committed to
huge.
BC. I forgot about that.
To Boston College.
Chris tweeted it. I'm like, that's right. I forgot about that.
Sure was.
Yeah, incredible. Well, how about this? I saw this on Twitter, and obviously this is the topic of conversation, and it's worth bringing up. I screenshotted it here. So Virginia Tech and North Carolina both went out, and Miami beats Louisville on Saturday. Now, not an easy feat. Louisville's very good, but if anybody can, Miami's one of those teams that could stir the pot. Then Virginia Tech makes the ACC championship game.
Yeah, you might need to forget about this fever dream from actually happening. Yeah. There's no chance.
But it's not as hard as I thought.
There's only 2 games left, so of course it's not that complicated.
Right
but
now,
it would take... Like, North Carolina's not going to beat Clemson this week.
They got Clemson left, and then after that, they got NC State.
They're not going to beat NC State. The team that is always expected to win that game ends up losing. And also, I don't think Louisville's going to lose to Miami because
UNC can barely beat a team with no quarterback. They gave up 45 points to a team with no quarterback this past week.
Right. Like, how many? Brennan Armstrong hasn't been great. And he's unbenched now that...
if Tech gets through this week and it's still a realistic possibility, then I think you can talk about it. But right now, it's like 6 different things need to happen for this. Like, I would so probably unlikely. Not worry about that.
5 games. And look, right now, I'm not too keen on playing any sporting event in Charlotte right now. to be honest. Charlotte might be the new Heinz Field.
5 games, and are any of those even better than a 50-50 proposition of happening?
Right.
Some of them are much lower than that. So
I think the least likely of all of it to happen is actually, I like Carolina to win out more than I like Miami to beat Louisville. I think Louisville's kind of a freight train.
I don't think North Carolina's winning.
Carolina's very capable of winning out, but they've been very capable of doing a lot more under Mac Brown than they have. It's
true.
So.
No doubt about it. No doubt. All right. Well, it was worth bringing up. It was definitely worth
just so
bringing
we could shoot it down.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. All right. Let's take a look at these buy or sell results because it was kind of a wild week. You guys did a lot good, but then you did a lot where we completely missed the boat. All 4 of us sitting on the set were way off. So
how could we not have seen 600 yards of offense coming? Everything was
idiots.
pointing that direction after the Louisville game.
I mean, you guys just kept hammering home for those that might not have watched the preview episode. You were like, low scoring, rock fight, defensive battle. Last time you guys said that was the Pitt game and we had an offensive explosion.
When's the last time Virginia Tech and Boston College played a pretty game in Chestnut Hill? So it's not like Tech fans have this.
The 2019 game was high scoring.
Didn't they score 45?
A lot of turnovers.
Wasn't pretty from a Tech fan perspective.
They scored a lot of points. I'll say that.
Yeah, 28. But like the main thing is like whenever Tech wins in Boston College, it's ugly. And most of the time, even when they lose, it's ugly. So even though Tech was 4-3 against BC in its last 7 games at BC, Tech fans went into this game thinking, oh, it's at Boston College, we're going to lose. And I'm like, you've literally won over 50% of your games there over the last 7, but you think you're going to lose just because all the wins were ugly.
Well, the over-under was in the 44 or something like that. They scored 70 points. So Vegas didn't see this one coming either.
Right,
so.
No doubt.
Very unusual, this result.
Well, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. As our presenting sponsor, First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to TSL, helping us to bring you all this great content across all of our platforms. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Bank with First Bank and Trust Company. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. All right, let's start at the top of our buy-sell results. First and foremost, everybody started with a big fat X, 0-1 on the week. Virginia Tech 2 or more sacks. Tech didn't have a single sack.
They were close. APR was so close to getting number 10.
Yes.
And his knee was just off the ground.
That was
and he threw it away. Yeah. Yep. But you look at the box score and you're like, okay, the reason that they didn't get sacks is 1, BC runs the football, but 2, really just lack of opportunity. I mean, Tech was dominating the game, so it just didn't feel like the opportunity was there as much. So everybody started 0-1 because everyone thought they would get 2 or more sacks. Virginia Tech forces a turnover. Everybody bought it. Virginia Tech indeed
one play in, that one cashed right away. Yeah. That's a great feeling.
That was immediate. Castellanos, 16 or more carries. Everybody bought it. He only had 11.
He did leave the game.
Yeah, they took him out late in the game.
Yep.
That probably didn't help.
Vegas, but Vegas, if you get injured, you play a snap.
They were down, so we had to
and they
throw
only
it
had the ball 24 minutes.
Yep.
So remember, they had the time of possession was like 36 to 24, basically, in Virginia Tech's favor. Their previous 2 games, Boston College was at over 40 minutes, and another game, almost 45 minutes. Like they're literally having the ball 2/3 to 3/4 of their previous 2 games, and Virginia Tech totally turned the tables on them this week. And so, like, yeah, the offensive numbers for Boston College, you're just not going to have as many opportunities. But on the other side of it, you're not going to have as many opportunities for sacks,
right?
For like Tech's defense.
Boston College throws the ball 29 or more times. Everybody sold it, and you guys were right. 27 times was the amount that they sold it, so close. Boston College, 205 or more rushing yards. Chris and Andy both sold it. David bought it. It didn't hit. They had 124 yards on the ground as a squad.
Finally, like a normal game of rushing yards for the Tech defense. It's either like 0 or 300. It's never like 124.
And 124, that's 77 yards, I think, under their season average, or more than that. I'm doing the math wrong. I think it's 87 yards under their season average. I mean, they did a good job. They called it caging the rabbit, is what they called it afterwards. It's like just not letting him get loose. And Castellanos got loose a little bit early on, but they did a pretty good job of containing him, keeping him in the pocket, making him throw the ball away. So impressive job by that defense.
Boston College, 195 or more passing yards. Everybody sold it. You were all right. They had 138 yards through the air. Castellanos accounts for 3 or more touchdowns. Everybody sold it. You guys were right. He had 1 touchdown on the day. Kyron Drones accounts for 3 or more touchdowns. Everybody sold it. You guys were right. He had 2 on the day.
That's a shame because he deserved a rushing touchdown.
That did not seem like it fit the way the game played out there.
Well, Bashal Tuen had 3 himself.
Yeah, he did.
So, and then speaking of which, Bashal Tuen anytime touchdown. Chris bought it. Andy bought it. David actually sold it to stir the pot a little bit. Well, he had 3. So.
The 3 was just rubbing it in at that point.
For sure. John Love, 3 or more field goals. Chris and Andy bought it. David sold it. David was right. He only had 2 in the ball game. One of them was a long one, though.
I was not expecting this kind of red zone efficiency from Virginia Tech in this game.
I don't think
I was feeling pretty good about that after the start where they had to settle for one. I'm like, okay, this is going to catch easily. No chance.
How much? Be honest with you. How much are you actually thinking about buy or sell when you're doing the game? Or when you're
when stuff happens, I'm thinking about it.
You're thinking about it?
I'm like, oh yeah, that one's gonna hit. That one's gonna hit right here.
Nice. We have a guy who might end up getting in the mix here a little bit as a student intern, Raza, and I didn't realize he's one of our good friends, works for 3304 and stuff, covers the games. You guys know him, and he plays, and I didn't realize, and he sent me his screenshots, and he's like, gonna be a wild week on the podcast. Like, other people are playing buy or sell along with us, so that's kind of fun. Virginia Tech, 200 or more passing yards. Everybody sold it. Hokies hit. They had 237 through the air as a squad, and Grant Wells got into the mix with 18 yards of his own.
When you have a 70-yarder, that one's probably going to hit.
That helps.
Yeah, it should hit.
It helps, for sure. Kyron Drones, 14 or more carries. Everybody bought it. He did. He had 20 carries in the ball game. Kyron Drones, 60 or more rushing yards. Everybody bought it, and he doubled up and then some. He had 135.
He had 59 on one play, so that helps.
So was that Tech's second longest run from scrimmage this year, the 59-yarder running play?
Well, now it is.
Right. At the time, it was the highest, and then Wells' 60-yarder was the highest. So imagine a game where you have your 2 longest runs from scrimmages for the season in the same game. That's how dominant Virginia Tech was.
Both by quarterbacks.
Both by quarterbacks.
Exactly.
So bizarre. Virginia Tech, 5 plays of 20 or more yards. Chris sold it. Andy sold it. David sold it. They had 7 plays of 20 or more yards. Impressive for the Hokies.
That was a brutal hit there. That one was going to be over early, it felt like.
Yeah. Jalen Lane, 2 or more carries. Chris sold it. Andy sold it. David did buy it. No carries for Jalen Lane.
The only thing Virginia Tech didn't do in the running game was like
they didn't need
sweep.
to.
They didn't have to.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and the reason I picked the number 2 is because I was looking through. About half the games, he has 2 carries, and about half the games, he has 0 carries. So he's either doing it or not, and he's not like doing just one play. It's usually 2 plays, which is just kind of bizarre. So that's kind of why I picked that number. Jalen Lane, 55 or more receiving yards. Despite having a touchdown, he only had 32 yards through the air. Chris sold it. Andy and David both bought it. Obviously, it didn't hit. Quan Felton, 3 or more catches. Chris sold it. Andy sold it. David bought it. David was right. He had 4 catches. And obviously one of them was a 70-yarder. Kelly Lawson, 7 or more tackles. You guys nailed this one. Everybody sold it. He only had 2. So you saw that downward trend, and that pointed you in the right direction. APR sack, so close. Everybody bought it for his 10th sack, and instead a donut for the Hokies in the sack department.
Inches away.
Yeah, literally inches away. Virginia Tech, this one was fun here. Virginia Tech goes better than 45% on 3rd down. Everybody sold it. They went 7 of 15 for 46%.
Wow.
That's a line right there, baby.
It really is.
That's a line right there. I was proud of that one. I was proud of that one. Tech goes for it on 4th down 2 or more times. Chris bought it. Andy bought it. David sold it. And they did. They went 2 of 2. So that one hit right on the line.
2 of 2, and they lined up for another one that didn't count.
True.
The snap infraction.
That's right. So technically that could have been, but the stat sheet, the box score read 2 of 2. Virginia Tech, 23 or more points. Chris bought it. Andy and David sold it. They dropped a 48 piece.
That wasn't even true at halftime. It was 31 at halftime. It's like, man, this one is over.
I don't even feel good about getting that one right because I picked him to score 23 points.
We got always be redshirting.
Yeah.
And on top of Andy, we need this one is over. But we need the OVA. Game over. There we go. Virginia Tech goes 50% or better on touchdown to field goals in the red zone. Everybody sold it. And I said to you guys, I was like, man, I'm going to laugh when this one hits. 4 touchdowns on 5 trips in the red zone. And the funny part is, as we talked about, the first one was the one that didn't hit. It was the John Love field goal on the first drive following the interception. And then after that, they were lights out within the 20. The over ended up hitting. It was 49.5. Everybody picked the under. The over killed you guys in dramatic fashion, considering it was 49.5 and the Hokies scored 48 themselves.
And should have had more. They had a punt return called back for a touchdown. They had the Wells fumble at the end. Like as lopsided this game was, it wasn't even as close as the score indicated. It should have been a much bigger margin of victory.
That punt return, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. What was it? They called the block in the back?
It was a
blindside.
Clear block in the back. Yeah, and it did spring lane.
For sure. Because he was about to get colliding with the 2 guys, and it completely freed him up.
But Lane made a couple nice moves to get through there. It's impressive that they have 2 guys that are capable of that.
We talked about that before the season. Like, how do you pick one?
Why wasn't Tucker back there?
He was banged up a little bit this week. And he got back there late in the game and actually muffed one when I didn't see exactly what happened. Again, his own teammate kind of ran into him.
Yeah, that didn't really show a great replay of it, I don't think. I also wasn't paying as close attention at that point.
I wasn't either.
I was just kind of like celebrating at that point.
Enjoying it. I remember putting in our group chat, I was like, you know what? Please have that muffed punt happen in this Boston College game because it doesn't matter. And if he's going to muff one this year, I'm fine with it being in this game where we're already.
Well, I'm sure Stu Holt's like, this is a good teaching point. I'd rather have this teaching point in a 26-point win, whatever it ended up being, than a tight game where that's the difference in the outcome.
Right, absolutely. Virginia Tech wins. Chris bought it. Andy bought it. David sold it in his prediction. You had the Eagles. Virginia Tech did indeed win. And then I didn't count it in points because it just felt a little unfair considering Andy set his own line and everyone's like, well, we got to agree with that. But Andy, 3 or more bowls of clam chowder, he hit it right on the money.
That one hit.
With 3. So another good line. That time it was set by Andy. So you look at the final standings on the week and then where we sit all time. Chris had the best week. He went 15-10, which was impressive. David struggled a little bit, 10-15. Andy was very steady though, 13-12. So you were in the plus. All time is where it gets very fun. Will is still in last. He's 9-10 all time on the one show he was on, 47%. David, 32-29-1 all time. I basically got rid of the 1 when calculating. David's 52% when guessing correct. And this is where the pot has really been stirred. Chris is 38-24 all time. That's good for 62%. He had a big week. Andy's 50-31. Also good for 62%.
Oh, wow.
Oh, well, dang.
So the 2 studs on set are completely tied in buy or sell with 2 weeks left of the season.
This game is on. It's not over. It's on.
The bowl game might be end up being a tiebreaker or something.
There we go.
Yeah. So I'm glad we ended up making this shift to win percentage because things definitely just got very, very interesting. Fellas, all in all, let's kind of put an end cap on this football here. Let's hear from David in the 4th chair. D, kind of how we feeling on the football side of things?
Yeah, good. I mean, I just tried to be different and by ourselves. So that's I don't know if I have anything to lose.
See, you're going downhill since we changed the rules and you don't get to pick last all the time.
That's true.
I was trying to change it up on purpose because if there were times whatever, Chris. I don't really care, but I was trying to be different. I was just running the numbers. Virginia Tech averaged 8 yards on first down this week. In the last 4 games, Wake Forest Tech averaged 9 yards per play on first down. Against Syracuse, it was 8. Against Louisville, it was 2.3, and then Boston College, it was 8. You look at those first 5 games, 2.3, 4.6, 6.0, 5.2, 3.3. And then that Florida State game, it jumped up to 6.6. So, Tech has averaged in 3 of the last last 3 wins, Tech has averaged 8 or more yards on first down, which I think is pretty impressive when you look at it that way. I think you guys will find this interesting. In wins, Virginia Tech on third down is 35 of 75. That's 47%. In losses, Tech is 13 of 64, which is 20%.
Wow.
So big difference, and I think a lot of that has to do with, as we talked about last week, where Tech is behind the sticks. I did get a question about Kyron Drones. This is from Ranger Sam on the boards. He said, group's thoughts today on the future of VT's quarterback. If Drones is our model, big, strong, with throwing touch, do we recruit bigger quarterbacks to handle the carries and workload, or use a Tyrod Taylor style and hope they stay healthy?
You would, if Pop, let's fast forward to next season when you assume Watson's going to be the backup, you'd have to change styles a little bit if Watson had to come in the game, because you probably can't have a 20 carry game with Watson. He's about 190 pounds. He's going to physically look like Castellanos, when he taps out, once he gets another year or two in the weight room. But he's not going to be a 20 carry a game guy, I don't think. So you'd have to adjust the type. Like if you're going to run your quarterback, like Tech runs drones between the tackles, like a battering ram, like they ran Logan Thomas. I think you probably run Pop, or a guy like Pop, a little more to the outside per se. And your read option plays are targeted to the outside with your to the outside with your quarterback, and to the inside with your running back. So I think you reverse some things, and he doesn't have quite as many carries, or at least just not as many designed carries. But you don't have to change the scheme or anything like that. You just tweak exactly how you use the player. Ideally, you'd like to have your backup be the exact same type as your starter, but that's not always realistic.
I say recruit talent and sort it out later. Like, adjust your offense to what you have. Some of these coaches are just like, I can only coach in this certain system, or we're going to recruit the same guys. Like, you're not going to get the same kind of talent all the time. Like, Michael Vick was different from Brian Randall, was different from Tyrod Taylor. Adjust it to the skills that you have on this team. And if you put yourself in a box offensively and then something goes wrong and you can't, duplicate that success, I mean, you have to switch it around. You have to play to your strengths. You're not always going to have a strong receiver core in a single season, or a strong offensive line, or maybe your running backs or quarterbacks a little bit less mobile than it is. Really good coaches and offensive coordinators can adjust to that. So I always like, is this the type they're going for? It's like, I think you want the talented type, and then you figure out the rest later.
I will say this kind of spurred my interest a little bit, because I was curious looking at the types of quarterbacks they're recruiting. Obviously, Pop, smaller, speedier. Davey Belfort, kind of the same thing, not a big guy. But you fast forward to 2024, and the quarterbacks that they have offered, 6'1", 6'3", 6'3", 6'5", 5'11", 5'10", 6'2.5", 6'3", 6'3", 6'3", 6'4". More of a Kyron Drones type frame.
Well, you mean 2025, because Belfort's the 2024.
I'm on. Yeah, I guess
Tech also has a commitment from a quarterback in the 2025.
Is that Keldon Ryan?
Yeah, from Texas.
Right.
I forget his exact size.
Also, let's not forget that how many straight transfers have they had? Quarterbacks.
I mean,
we can talk about how they were offered in high school. It's like, they're going to bring in a transfer and he's going to start. That's how it's worked lately.
You're even talking about like Pop Watson. Like, let's say my dream happens and Virginia Tech actually has the same starting quarterback for multiple seasons in a row, which it's setting up to happen, of Kyron Drones being a 3-year starter.
You're jinxing it by saying
God, I know. I'm sorry in advance, Kyron. But you're talking about Pop Watson not starting until he's a redshirt junior. How many guys these days wait around to do that?
Right.
So I think I understand, like, the overall question. Yes, Virginia Tech, you're going to recruit a mobile quarterback. That's the system I think Virginia Tech needs to run. But digging down into it this year and saying who's the right fit and is this going to be this quarterback? I don't know. I don't know. Who knows if it's going to be a high school player? Who knows if it's going to be a portal guy? Right now, I'm counting on Drones as the quarterback for the next 2 seasons. But you got to make sure you do have a capable backup. But you don't have to change the offense with Pop Watson. You change probably where his runs are targeted and how many design runs you call for him, but the offense itself doesn't change.
Stat time with Scott Glesner.
Well, I was
Yeah.
going to say, I have a trivia question for you guys.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Oh.
So this was the third time since 1987 Virginia Tech had two different players with a long of 59 or more yards, a rush long of 59 or more yards in a game. Obviously, Kyron Jones and Grant Wells both had a run of 59 yards or longer. 3 other games. One was in 2010, one was in 93, and one was in 94. Sorry, one was in 95, one was in 96. 2010, which game do you think it was?
Wake Forest.
No.
No.
Yeah, this is all before my time covering
Okay.
on the beat. So
yeah, I got nothing.
I'm trying to. Some 2010. I know they played Boise State and lost, and James Madison and they lost.
It was a home game.
It was a home game.
Tech won 45-21.
Oh God. Yeah, they scored 50 in the 50s against Wake, so it wouldn't have been that one. Yeah, I don't know.
It was Central Michigan.
Okay.
David Wilson and Tyrod Taylor had a 68 and 72 yard rushing. In 1996, Ken Oxendine and Marcus Parker, 71 yard long, 73 yard long.
Temple.
Yes.
38 nothing. I don't know how I remember that.
That's impressive, Chris.
And Chris, from 1995, Virginia Tech put up 77 points against this team.
it's got to be Rutgers. Or Akron?
77-27.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Marcus Parker and Ken Oxendine, 59-68 again.
Yes, and that would have been my pick. So the crazy thing is, neither one of those games were televised, and I don't know how I just know. Yeah.
Narrated by the great voice of Bill Roth and Mike Burnop.
Yes.
Chris knew
Absolutely.
exactly what was going on.
Yep.
That's high quality play by play. All right, we going stats with Scott Glesner, fellas. Let's let Andy kick us off here at the top.
We start at the very top.
Yeah, we'll start at the top.
This was the Virginia Tech's 4th straight game against Boston College, where BC's first drive had a turnover.
So that's obviously going to be when the next time Tech plays Boston College. That'll be your buy-sell.
Oh yeah. There we go.
I'm trying to think. Last year, Armani Chapman had the early one. What was the one?
The year before?
Was it Jurkovic through the pick in the end zone that Strong then fumbled coming out of the end
That might
zone?
have been it.
Because we brought that up because Dorian played so well. By the way, Dorian having an all ACC.
Oh yeah, we
type
need to
season,
talk
like
about
first team all ACC
Seven
type season.
opposing quarterbacks are 7 of 24 with 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, and 76 total yards when they're targeting him.
Yeah.
His QB rating against, if you use the NFL model, is 14.2.
Yeah.
And Tech does not intercept the ball very much, and he does it more than anybody, obviously.
He really, like, the way the voting goes with that stuff, people will look at interceptions.
Correct.
First. So he's got 2 now. He's up tied for 5th or 8th, something like that in the ACC. So he's in the conversation there. But if you looked at the advanced stats or some of the more deeper stats and Pro Football Focus and stuff like that, he's easily first team all ACC this year.
Yeah,
That'll be my inside the numbers later this week.
I looked it up. FBS cornerbacks who have played a minimum of 50% of the snaps this season. He leads the nation in fewest receptions allowed, reception percentage, and he's second in yards allowed. He's allowed seven receptions on 24 passes targeted, and he's only allowed 76 total yards.
He'll get honorable mention because nobody pays any attention to stuff like that.
He's got
except us.
3 picks. He had one against ODU as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He tied for 8th, I think. Third, tied for 5th, I think. I think he's tied for 8th in pass breakups.
Gotcha. Absolute stud. Chris, you want to hit us with the next stat?
Since 1995, when Virginia Tech has a field goal on their first drive, they are 28-8.
Pretty impressive.
I'll be honest, I don't know what to make of that.
I don't either.
No doubt. All right. Well, since 1994, when Virginia Tech has forced a turnover on an opponent's first drive, they are 38-6. I mean,
that one
makes sense. Yeah. You start with a turnover. Usually, you put yourself in a good spot. David, you want to hit us with the next one?
Sure.
Number 4
is not following. Okay. Last week, Virginia Tech scored 3 points and then followed up with 48 points. The previous time they scored 3 points, they followed it up with 48 points
That's
in 2021.
Wow.
That's just weird.
So yeah,
That's a weird
so they
amount.
scored
That was
3 against BC and then 48 against
Andy,
Duke.
that was
And then Fuente
Justin
got
Fuente's
fired.
last game.
A lot of
Don't think Pry will be getting fired.
a lot of Jimbo Fisher similarities.
is.
To they beat the heck out of Mississippi State, and then a couple days later they're like, "We'll give you $77 million to go away."
And then Mississippi State
Great
fired.
deal. Yeah,
Mississippi State fired their coach. It's like, well, you just lost by 1,000,000 points to the guy who just got fired.
Yeah,
so we
they're
should
like,
probably
we
fire
probably
you
should
too.
do it too. It's
Yeah.
probably time.
Game over.
Game over.
Virginia Tech's last win without recording a sack was 2017, and it was against Boston College on the road. They won it 23-10 that day in Chestnut Hill. Virginia Tech had lost their previous 10 games when not recording a sack. That includes Louisville last week.
That
That
makes sense.
That was such a boring game. That 2017, like they got up and then just kind of like
Cruised.
yeah, that was the Sean Savoy game. Yeah,
That's the
a
only
big
thing I
game in
remember was
that
the
one.
RPO touchdown to Sean Savoy.
Yeah, I think he had 100 yards in that game or close to it, and then BC. That might have been that wasn't the game over game, but it was one where BC ran a trick play late, I think, and in the press box you don't always have just media up there. Sometimes there's like some donors or something that get in there. It's like a trick play to the wide receiver who's going to throw it deep. And once the play started breaking, the guy was like wide open down the field. And this guy just blurts out the press box. He goes, "He's wide open!" Just like screams on the press box. And they completed. They didn't score a touchdown on that play, but they did complete it. But I think that was one of the only offensive plays that they had in that game. Yeah.
They teach us in class to not do things like that when in a press box. And
Yeah, it's if you were an accredited media member, you would probably get kicked out for something like that. But,
Right.
You know, if you're a fan donor, they'll be like, okay, let's maybe not do that.
Right. Chris, you want to hit us for the next one?
Yeah, I won't read the entire paragraph because
A lot going on there.
It's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
But the last time Virginia Tech had a 100-yard rusher and receiver in the same game was the 2021-2016 26-17 win against Georgia Tech. Malachi Thomas had 103 rushing yards that day. Trey Turner had 187 receiving yards that day. That was actually the last game Trey Turner played for Virginia Tech. Because I remember he got hurt in that game.
He had the like a weird like throat bubble or something.
Bubble
like
just
air
kept,
bubble.
yeah,
Yeah.
strange.
I remember us talking to him after the game because we were interviewing him because he had a huge game and he was talking and all of a sudden his voice was doing this weird stuff. It's like, I don't know what's going on with my voice. And sure enough, that was like the first signs of something like that was happening.
I don't think Tech ever really figured that out. Like I even remember like Fuente saying on like a Tech Talk Live that like our medical staff that they've never heard of anything like that.
It was where he drove to Miami. He played after that because he played at Miami.
Right,
He drove
right.
all the way to Miami. He got hurt at Miami though.
Right.
And there was like, did he re-injure? Did he do something else to it? So
Yeah.
I mean,
I remember
the dedication to drive all the way
drive to
down there and
Miami.
then get injured
Yeah.
again and not be able to play in that. It's,
Was it?
and he actually did play in the UVA game. I think he recovered
really?
an onside kick at the end.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think he
Hands
played
team.
one snap in that game.
Yep.
J.C. Price coached that game at Miami too. That was
That's right. That was the first one.
That was on interim basis.
One of the first ones at post Fuente. Yeah.
I think that was he coached 2 games, right? Miami,
Yeah, the Miami
then
game was the
UVA?
first one after Fuente.
Yep.
Because the Duke game was in between those, I think.
Yes.
Or somewhere in
That's the
between
game where
those.
Raheem Blackshear only got 2 carries. One day I'll get over that. Probably not today though.
Andy, you want to hit us with another one here?
Well, I mentioned this before. Virginia Tech's last game with 600 yards of total offense, the 2018 loss at ODU.
Exactly 600. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I was like, you're writing the game story at the end. You're like, are they going to get to 600 in this game? Then Pop Watson had that run at the very end. It's like, what's the total? Wow, what did they get to? 600 on the dot. So it's nice when you're writing. It's like, all right, it's a nice clean number, 6
Yeah.
bills to put into a story.
It almost sounds like unreal though. Like when you read it, you're like, no way they had 600 on the dot. Like not 601, not 598. You know?
Yeah. I if you're sitting there at 599, you're like, find a way to give him an extra yard on one of those
Give us a
plays.
generous
right?
spot
But
here.
that's the first time since 1993 that Tech put up 600 yards on the road against a Power 5 opponent. And that was the Pitt game when they had 675 yards. And a very similar game, like Tech, they ran for 500 yards against Pitt. Maurice DeShazo had a line pretty similar to Drone's. 10 of 15 for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just not a lot of passing, but the passing game was extremely efficient because of how well the running game went.
So you can play well on the road at Pitt.
Apparently, that wasn't Heinz Field.
Back in the
that wasn't Heinz Field.
Pre Acrisure Stadium.
There we go. Chris, how about you skip to the bottom for us? We're going to save those handful in the middle for our NC State preview coming up on Thursday, but let's round us out here.
I will read this whole paragraph. Tech has yet to finish a game this season with a score in the 20s. The last time they finished a season without a score in the 20s was 1948. And that season, they were shut out the first 5 games and scored 7 points in each of their 4 remaining games. Also of note, there are 8 other FBS teams that have not scored in the 20s this season. SMU, Mississippi State, Penn State, Washington, Oregon, Air Force, Boise State, and Arkansas State. So you're either getting like totally shut down offensively, or you're just drubbing teams. Kind of like their run defense.
Some of those are not like the others. I think Washington and Oregon are they're not on the lower end.
And Penn State either gets shut down by
Penn State, which just fired his offensive coordinator.
Yes,
Mississippi State, which just fired their head coach.
James Franklin goes through offensive coordinators like,
oh my God,
like Tic Tacs. Like it's one every year. They're just out of there. It's amazing.
This is a complete side note, but it like literally baffles me how they do not win the big game. They're really, really good, and then they just are so shut down against Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah, they can't quite get the X's and O's right on offense. I don't think. Yeah, they had Moorhead, but they also had 2 awesome players. You know, a great running back and a great quarterback, but they just haven't quite been able to get over the hump. They're the 3rd most talented team in that league, so they're the consummate. We're going to beat every team that we have more talent than, and lose to both teams who out-talent us.
It's probably how a lot of SEC teams feel about Alabama and Georgia. It's like when those top 2 are so good, so consistently good, that's got to drive you crazy.
Crazy. After the loss on Saturday, Franklin is now a combined 4-16 against both Michigan and Ohio State during his decade-long stint in Happy Valley. That's
sounds about right.
That's kind of wild right there. Final thoughts on football before we turn the page here and talk a little bit of hoops. Unfortunately, we started on such a high, and now we're going to drop down a little bit here. But let's get the final thoughts on football before we preview NC State on Thursday.
It's funny. I know a guy who is basically a Hall of Fame coach in the state of Virginia at the high school level, and I asked him before the season. He knows Tech's personnel and coaching staff very, very well. I asked him before the season, how many games do you think Tech will win? And he said 7. He texted me back after the Marshall game and said, I'm revising my pick, 3 or 4 wins, which is pretty much what we said.
Yeah. Podcast dedicated to that.
And then he texted me back during the Boston College game and said, I think my original prediction is going to turn out to be right. And I think I think Tech has a strong chance to get to 7 wins this year. NC State, they're going to bring in a Louisville-level defense next weekend. They're also going to bring in a Syracuse-level offense. Yeah. I think that's a very winnable game. That might be the first time Tech scores in the 20s next week.
You should know that they put up 379 yards of offense this past week, and Brennan Armstrong had a 93 offensive PFF grade.
Yeah, you gotta love that it's going to be in Lane. I think if it's in Raleigh, you're really looking at a different. This team plays very well in Lane this year.
Yeah, they do. And Brennan Armstrong, you know, he hadn't had the greatest passing game, but they only have 1 good receiver, and he can really run. Like, he dominated on the ground this past week against Wake Forest. Like, I feel worse about the game with Brennan Armstrong than I do Morris, because Morris averaged 0.5 yards per carry. He couldn't run, and you're not going to beat Tech through the air, but you can beat him on the ground. Mm-hmm. Brennan Armstrong is a worse matchup for Virginia Tech. I still think Tech will probably win at home. And
I like it at home.
And I think they'll beat UVA. So that's my thought right now, is this looks like it's a decent chance it's going to be a 7-5 team. Of course, if everything goes, it's also capable of being a 5-7 team if like everything goes wrong. But
so that was my question for you. Is that 7 wins including the bowl or pre-bowl?
Well, 7-5 regular season.
There we go.
Yeah, and Military Bowl seems to really fancy the Hokies right now.
They always fancy the Hokies. If they have an opportunity, they will jump all over them. I think the closing point on this BC win is, I felt like Virginia Tech just had an aggressive mindset from the very start. I mean, aggressive play on the first play of the game. They were going to go for it on 4th down near the goal line there. They did go for it on 4th down a couple of times. They kept running it and just pounding it straight at BC. They did that onside kick, which we didn't even mention.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that. That's my fault.
Perfect timing. Perfect execution. Jalen Jones has been a lot of negative talk about his defensive play, but he was great on that special teams. Darted out there, got it. Perfect placement by Kyle Lowe to get it just over 10 yards when they recovered it. I thought there was an attitude that they had throughout that entire game. So we're going to be the aggressors in this game. We're going to keep going at them and not relent and let up. And, start to finish, that's the way it was. And you look at the scoreboard, you go, man, how can you duplicate that? How can you play like that every week and have that mindset? So if they can get back to that, I like their chances down the stretch here. NC State, that's a legit defense, though. They're not going to be running free through open holes like they were against Boston College this week.
And it's an odd front defense, which is the type of defense that was giving Tech a lot of trouble earlier in the season. Shout out to Stu Holt for that play design on the onside kick. I met his mom at PK's on Saturday night. Yeah,
everything goes down at the Blacksburg bars. That's where
you hear
the information's
stories.
flowing all over the place.
Seriously, what do you got, David?
I know. I'm sure Gio, you know what this is, and I know Andy knows what this is. The did we really get beat that bad? Chart. Yeah. Virginia Tech is the 5th to the right, so 5th best win. You know what is the one right in front of Virginia Tech this week? Texas A&M.
Yeah. That was a butt kicking at that one.
Game over.
The other thing I want to say is, obviously you two are now one ahead of Will and I in the picks because I went against the grain and picked Boston College, and I did so because Tech had yet to prove that it could win on the road, and after obviously reading what Andy wrote, editing it, just listening to how Tech got this coaching staff and everybody got the team fired up, they did what they had to do, and that is a good sign. And I picked against Tech because Tech hadn't won on the road this year. Happy to be proven wrong. That is like you kind of, Chris, what you wrote yesterday, another step forward in terms of now Virginia Tech, can you go win maybe a close game? Tech has not won a close game yet this year.
Beat a good defense.
Yes.
Can you do it against a good defense?
Yeah.
You got that chance this weekend.
Chris, as you wrote yesterday, in terms of SP Plus ratings, or maybe it was Andy, NC State's the best team Tech will have. If Tech beats NC State, NC State will be the best team Tech has beaten.
Probably by a mile too, right?
This is a big test.
Well, that's the thing about this week, and it was a great win. BC, you go by the SP Plus, worse than Syracuse, Wake Forest, and Pitt. So this wouldn't have ranked very high. I mean, I know they're bowl eligible. I know they had won 5 straight. That was a team that had some issues under the hood if you looked at a lot of the stats.
Yeah. Regardless, you took a step forward. You won a ball game on the road, and nevertheless, a fun one at that. Always fun to watch your team hang 48 on anybody. It doesn't really matter who you're playing, especially though when it's a conference game on the road. You'll definitely take that. 2 more left, NC State, and then, of course, got to play that community college up north as well a couple Saturdays from now. Let's talk a little bit of hoops, gentlemen. We'll start with the women's side Thursday night. David, you can attest to this. Unbelievable atmosphere set up just to see not only women's basketball, but specifically Virginia Tech women's basketball in that spotlight on national television. It just felt like such a big game, really a Final Four type atmosphere. Despite the loss, it was a lot of fun and really, really well done by everybody that made the Ally tip-off happen.
Yeah, and I thought both coaches attested to it afterwards. I mean, these were 2 teams that played in the Final Four last year, and Kenny Brooks and Lisa Bluter both said, yeah, this atmosphere rivals the Final Four, which is kind of crazy to think about. I think what put it in perspective a little bit for me was that the next night, Virginia Tech played in the same arena, the men. And there was nowhere close to even half as many fans as the night before. There was not an open seat in the lower bowl for that women's game. And I tell you what, after that first quarter, I think the price of admission had already been paid. Caitlin Clark had a huge first quarter. Georgia Amore, obviously, she hit that 3, or the half court shot, I should say, at the end of the first quarter. Clark had 7, had hit a 3. Amore had 11, had hit 3 threes. They combined for Clark had 44, 8 and 6. Amore had 31 and 3. Kitley had 16 and 6. Most of that came in the fourth quarter, but Amore and Clark, people came to watch them. Obviously, a lot of people want to watch Caitlin Clark, and she had another triple-double yesterday against Northern Iowa. Yes, she had a 40-point game, but most of her points 13 of her points came from the free throw line. That's where she got most of her production. You take out the 13 points, and she and Georgia Amore have the same points.
5 of 14 from beyond the arc for Clark.
5 of 16.
5 of 16.
And this was and I think in terms of the game itself, there's not a lot of negatives to take away from this game. I think, yes, if you're Virginia Tech, you would have liked to win the game, obviously. But you learn a lot about your team. This is one of the best teams in the country. You are also one of the better teams in the country. You lose by 4 points on a neutral site where the best player in the nation goes off for 44. She has her 9th 40-point game of her career. Tech got into foul trouble. That hurt, obviously. And yes, you can complain about the refs all you want. I will say this, to Caitlin Clark's credit, and she admitted this after the game, we knew how they were calling the game, and so I attacked the rim. And I think there were a couple calls that probably could have gone the other way, but if the refs are going to call it one way and you can get those calls, I think it's kind of more power to you. And I think the one egregious call was when she kind of like lowered her shoulder a little bit against Carly Wenzel. But I thought we saw some bright spots from Tech. Carly Wenzel played very, very well. Oh, yeah. I mean, she's a redshirt freshman. That's her second ever game, and at times she had to guard Caitlin Clark. And
she was perfect from the floor.
Yeah, she played very, very well. Georgia Amore delivered. I think obviously it gives Tech a lot to work on. And Tech has, we're recording this on Monday. Tech has one game or 2 games this week. Then next week we'll go down to Cayman Islands and play Kansas, the WNIT champs, and Tulane, who went to the WNIT. And then they got LSU the following week. Two tune-up games this week. But you learn a lot from your team after playing in a big game like that. Just how kids perform under the lights. I thought we saw a lot from Karis Baker, a little bit. Clara Strack came in and played a little bit. I would have liked to see her play more. Olivia Sumiel, even Matilda Eck and Kayla King, didn't have their best games. But now these types of games, you don't like to play them, as Kenny Brooks said. But playing them now gives you a real good sense of what your team has the potential to look like if it gets better. You see this and go, man, they can compete on the biggest stage. If we get this much better, we'll be able to win a game like this come March when it matters.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought it was so telling too. Halftime, Caitlin Clark and Georgia Amore each had 18 points. And you just kind of sat back and were like, this was like the national championship last year. We wanted 1, but 2, it was like it didn't disappoint. You got the 2 premier players. I know Kit Lee, 2-time player of the year. By the way, I think Georgia might win the thing this year, ACC Player of the Year, which is crazy. Their best pals.
I tell you what, if I had to pick my top 3 players in the conference after the first week, it would be Amore, Tania Latson from Florida State. She's a baller.
Yes.
And then Sanaya Rivers from NC State. She had 30, 10, and 10. NC State beat UConn by 10 or 11 yesterday. She was on fire. But I think honestly, and I look at Kitley. She had 16 and 16. She scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. She scored Tech's first 2 buckets and then basically wasn't there for half the game.
Yes.
And that's when I say there's 30-something games between now and March when Tech will play another big-time game on a big stage like that in terms of a NCAA tournament game. Obviously, you want to win games between now and then, but there's a lot of time to correct stuff. And I think one of the biggest things is you got to get Kitley more involved. And Iowa did a great job defending her. They fronted her, put somebody behind her, made it really, really tough for her to do anything.
Goodman in particular made rebounding incredibly difficult. I thought.
And I think you look at Iowa, nobody else did anything crazy spectacular. Gabby Marshall, she had 0 points, played 38 minutes, defended Amore very, very well.
Back-to-back games, Gabby Marshall had 0 points for Iowa, which is kind of unlike them. Really.
Yeah, but she's a defender, and she defended, and she made life. I mean, Georgia Amore scored 31 points, and probably the most, that's her career high. Probably the most difficult 31 points Georgia Amore's ever scored in her career in any level of basketball. I mean, just the way Gabby Marshall defended her. And Iowa got Sydney Affolter had 14 rebounds off the bench. I thought that was huge. This is a game that Virginia Tech can learn from, and I think that's the biggest thing. Again, you would have liked to win, but it was a great crowd, great showing, great for women's basketball. I think going up against NFL and college football, it got like 600,000 viewers, which isn't, for a slot where you're facing two really big sporting events, not terrible. They're going to, once football season's over, I think there are going to be a lot of really good women's basketball games on. I know obviously the NC State UConn game was on yesterday too. So really good women's basketball week just all around.
Absolutely. Let's turn the page. Let's talk about the men's basketball team. Disappointing one, really, to put it bluntly, against South Carolina. Final score 79-77. Gamecocks took it in Charlotte. Initial thoughts, how devastating is this? It just felt like one of those, just because South Carolina was not a very good basketball team last year, that it wasn't going to help a ton of you won it. You were kind of supposed to win it, but it can hurt you when you get to the quad system later on come NCAA tournament time.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily that you win or you lose at this point. It's how you look and you try to project forward. And Tech's still got plenty of time to improve and things like that. But my general thought is, watching this team through 2 games, is obviously they're very well coached when you can have 29 assists on 32 made baskets. But then when you face a team that is actually big enough and athletic enough to hit back, you still can't play defense. And I think with 10 minutes left in that game, South Carolina was shooting 62%. Or something like that. I mean, it was just, and that's not good enough. And I know fans didn't like Wabisa Beatty because he couldn't shoot. I know a lot of them were ready to run Naheem Aline off because he was an inconsistent shooter. But Tech played defense with those guys, and they won. They went to the NCAA tournament with those guys. And when Tech won the ACC, is because they had 2 lockdown defenders in the backfield, Couture and Naheem Aline. And now they just have one, Couture, and they played him 40 minutes the other night when he was banged up, like he was limping in the second half, and they still kept him out there for 40 minutes. And I don't think you can do that. There's just not enough good defenders on this team. I don't think there's anything wrong schematically with Mike Young's defense. I just think as they've steadily through the years lost defensive talent, they haven't been able to replace it. And a lot of times, like, he recruits guys who are fit for his offensive system. Sometimes that means, like, he wouldn't have recruited Tyrese Radford. He wouldn't have recruited Wabisa Beatty because they weren't fits for his offensive system. Yet they helped Virginia Tech win a lot of basketball games because they were excellent defenders. Sometimes being a fit for his offensive system is not necessarily conducive to being a good defender. And so it means you have to score a lot of points. You can't have an 8 or 9 minute drought like Tech had shooting the ball the other night. Historically, Mike Young's teams at Wofford, they were far ahead offensively and offensive efficiency ratings than they were, defensive efficiency ratings. And I think his early teams at Tech were historically better defensive teams than his Wofford teams because he inherited elite defenders, like Wabisa Beatty, or Tyrese Radford. But as time has gone on, and it's his own players in the program, the only elite defender is Hunter Couture, and the defensive numbers are steadily dropping. So that's something I've got my eye on. And I don't know, they just don't have the look of, they had Basili in the front court last year. I know he got off to kind of a slow start, but they don't have the look of anybody in the front court this year being as dynamic as him. Yeah. So it just, disappointed with the not being as good defense, and it's just one game, but I'm less optimistic than I was before.
Not that he was going to be, but I think it's fair to say through 2 games, maybe it's not fair to say Robbie Barron is not Grant Basili.
We didn't expect him to. He averaged 7 points a game last year,
and he hit 7 on the dot in this game against South Carolina. And he got 1-3.
He got taken out because he came down the court and jacked up a 3 with 25 seconds on the shot clock, and
heat check after hitting 1.
Right.
By the way,
yeah, exactly, and I think so. That part of it's going to get better. There's guys adjusting to the system and everything like that. But the main thing to me is, like, I don't think there's enough good defensive players on this team, and ultimately you've got to do both. And I think I know people are going to want to talk about Rodney Rice, but we don't know if Rodney Rice would even be playing right now because he had mono, and he wasn't, like, he was held out in the preseason, like he was not cleared for physical contact. So we don't know if, like, Rodney Rice would have been the difference the other night or not, because we don't know if he would have been allowed to play medically. So you can only play with the guys you have, and was a little bit surprised that Young didn't play after I thought he played pretty well in his debut. But you can't be out there playing Hunter Couture 40 minutes in a basketball game. That especially when he was banged up a couple times.
He's limping the whole game. It felt like.
Yeah, you know. So it's just one game.
Yeah.
But I just don't quite see the pieces personally.
What do you got, David?
I got a lot of thoughts. First of all, Tech is Chris, you mentioned offensive and defensive efficiency. Ken Palm has Tech 16th in offensive efficiency, 141st in defensive efficiency.
Sounds
so that tells you how lopsided it is. My biggest question from the game was Robbie Barron. Because I tell you what, the thing that impressed me the most was Sean Padula. 26, 9, and 5.
Yeah, his rebounding. I mean, when you score 26 is great, but when your point guard has 9 rebounds.
He had 9 rebounds. He had the most rebounds for either team, and he tied for the second most assists for either team.
I'm gonna break in here with the line. Jamon Gordon, a 6'3" guard, once got 16 rebounds in a game for Virginia Tech, and he's on the post-game radio show. And he's saying, and he's reading his stat line with Mike Burnup, and he goes, man, 16 rebounds. If I was in high school and a guard got 16 rebounds, the coach would be making the big men run laps. And that's kind of how I feel after this game. It's like Sean Padula is even smaller than Jamon Gordon. Like he's listed at 6'1".
That was Clemson 2006.
Yeah, and I think he had another game that year against Florida State when he had like 13 or 14 rebounds.
Wake Forest 14.
Yeah, there you go. And full credit to Padula for getting 9 rebounds, but if you're a Tech big man in this game, you have to look at that and say, our point guard shouldn't be getting 9 rebounds. It should be us, getting those 9
I mean, to
rebounds.
be fair, Lynn Kidd had 6.
He did.
And Robbie Barron, I don't think Robbie Barron had 1 in 18 minutes. Not great. Elijah Poteet had 1. I have a lot of thoughts from this game in terms of like. Sean Padula is great. Sean Padula is going to carry this team, and it's going. Sean Padula is playing the best basketball of his career at Virginia Tech. Tech needs to surround him with the right pieces. Hunter Couture playing 40 minutes is tough, but I think Mike Young looks at his bench and goes, like my guess is he doesn't trust Brandon Recksteiner or Jaden Young to be able to lock down defenders. He played Tyler Nickel a lot. I was surprised about how little MJ Collins played, how little Robbie Barron played. Those guys played 18 minutes, less than 5 in the second half.
And they're both starters.
Robbie Barron's a guy Mike Young brought in to play defense. So I look at that and I go, all right, I understand he jacked up a 3 and that might not be what you wanted, but was it, I guess I know he got like beat once or twice on the defensive end. I mean, if he's a guy you brought in to play defense and he can't play defense, that's bad. And same thing with MJ Collins. Mike Young mentioned that he challenged MJ Collins to be able to guard the other team's best defender. He wasn't quite there yet. That he has not tasked MJ Collins with doing that yet. But MJ Collins barely played, and I look at this and go, okay, I was impressed with Lynn Kidd and Elijah Poteet. They combined for 21 points, 7 rebounds. They were all right.
Poteet seemed a little porous defensively, I thought.
Yeah, but I think that's the team as a whole. I think there were a lot. I think there were a lot of times where a guy drove into the lane by the first guy and there was no help. And I think Tech's defensive rotation just is not very good right now. Just the way they're complementing each other, and I that's the biggest problem. Tech finished 50% for the game, and it didn't help that Tech shot 37%, 2 of 14 from 3 in the first half. Tech hits one more 3, it's a different game. So I think like this is a, I don't want to say it's a bad result. South Carolina is going to be much, much better. South Carolina was picked 14th in the SEC. South Carolina is not going to finish 14th in the SEC. This is a team that probably will make at least the NIT, if not have a chance to be a bubble team for the NCAA tournament if it continues to play like this.
BJ Mack's pretty good.
Yeah. But I think like Miles Studi and, Mack is a force inside. Miles Studi and Talon Cooper, I mean, they've got experience. And I think that was Mike Young's big thing is like, Talon Cooper, he played for Minnesota last year against Virginia Tech. Mike Young knows how experienced these guys are. And he was worried, I think, if he throws Brandon Recksteiner or Jaden Young out, he's throwing them against guys that have 5 years of basketball on them. At times, you might have to make that sacrifice. Mike Young didn't want to do it there. I think defense, you got to fix the defense. And I think it has to get better. I think Barron is maybe a key to that. I was impressed with Mekhi Long. I thought Tyler Nickel was okay. Didn't really do much. There are a lot of question marks with this team. They go down to Orlando next week. They're going to play 3 really good teams. We'll know then what kind of the potential this team has this year.
Well, the cool thing is opportunities in front for the Hokies. The men's basketball team plays Campbell on Wednesday, 6 p.m. tip inside Castle Coliseum. The women's team back in action again. That's Thursday night, 6 p.m. tip against Houston Christian inside the Castle. Well, that wraps things up for today. It's been episode 329 of the Tech Sideline podcast. You also got football on Saturday. Stay tuned. We're going to do a Triumph Spotlight coming up with Dante Lovett. That'll come out on Wednesday. Thursday pod. Before we let everyone go, what do you guys have coming up this week? Anything in particular?
We'll have our normal week of content. I'll do an Inside the Numbers. I guess it's normal media stuff.
Mailbag week. I'll be doing normal.
Week,
We'll see who we get. Again, I mean, it's Monday. They never tell us till the last second. They switched it up a little bit last week, so never can tell. But
my timing on some things and posting of articles might be a little different because I have to go back to Danville in a little while and spend the night, and I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. But it'll still all be done or almost all done.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right, well, we'll see you guys on Thursday as we'll preview NC State and talk some more hoops for the upcoming weekend. But for now, for Nick Brown, for David Cunningham, for Andy Bitter, for Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long from Blacksburg, and we'll see you on Thursday.